Minister, has the Australian government placed any conditions on Sri Lanka's use of these two Australian patrol boats? Any conditions, any protocols, any limitations?
Well, the Prime Minister has announced that these vessels will be gifted to Sri Lanka, and it is now for me to confirm those arrangements with the Sri Lankan government. A week or so ago, or thereabouts, a bit longer than that actually, I wrote to the Prime Minister and recommended that these vessels do be gifted. It follows on from a meeting, Fran, you may recall, in January of this year. I travelled to Sri Lanka with the now Foreign Minister and Michael Keenan, and we held high-level meetings in Sri Lanka, and one of the key vulnerabilities they identified to us at that time was their long-range patrol capacity, and that is the vulnerability we're seeking to address in ensuring that they're able to continue doing what they've been doing for some time, and that is stopping boats leaving Sri Lanka.
And so when you write to confirm the arrangements, will you be also including in that discussion any kind of protocol or essential agreement that would prevent the Sri Lankan Navy, for instance, using these two patrol boats for military purposes? Well,
not only the Sri Lankan Navy, but there's also the Coast Guard as well, and how these vessels are used within their maritime operations to prevent people smuggling. That is the purpose for this gift. That is the vulnerability.
That is our purpose, but is there any guarantee from Sri Lanka that is the only purpose they'll be used for?
Fran, we're gifting these vessels, and we will work constructively through those issues with the Sri Lankan government. They have been an outstanding partner with us for some time, despite little support from the previous government. But I will say this, the previous government, when Senator Carr was there last December, gifted surveillance equipment to the Sri Lankan government to monitor people smuggling activity. Now, it's still not clear to me whether that was ever provided, and he outlined a range of other things, including looking at these types of arrangements for providing patrol assets. Now, I don't recall any great hubbub at the time about that from the government and members of the Labor Party, but we're continuing that approach. We believe in a constructive engagement with Sri Lanka because prosperity and peace and stability are the way forward in Sri Lanka, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, though, as you do organise the arrangements with the handover of these boats, whether you will be asking for any protocols be put in place to make sure that these boats are only used for the purpose which you said they've been gifted for, which is long-range patrolling to prevent people smugglers.
Well, as I say, we'll work through those arrangements with the Sri Lankan government.
Is that a no?
No, I'm telling you, we'll work through those arrangements with the Sri Lankan government, and that's the appropriate place to have those discussions, Fran.
The Greens' criticism is that the Australian government is, quote, assisting a disgraced government to suppress and control its citizens. Minister, what is to stop these boats from forcing back Tamils trying to flee persecution?
Well, if the suggestion, Fran, is that we're giving these boats to stop people coming to Australia illegally by boat, that's true. That's exactly why we're doing this. We are looking to stop people coming to Australia illegally by boat. And the Sri Lankan government has been assisting not only our government but the previous government to achieve that very task. Now, we want to assist them to do that because we don't want people getting on these boats and coming to Australia and drowning along the way. And that's why we're working closely with the Sri Lankan government. So I make no apologies for the fact that we are endeavouring to work with the Sri Lankan government to stop boats coming to Australia. That's the point.
But what about if you're in stopping boats coming to Australia illegally, you're stopping people who are fleeing persecution? To quote the Greens again, I don't think Australians who genuinely thought stopping the boats was about saving lives will be comfortable knowing that stop the boats now means preventing people from running away from torture.
Well, 79 out of the last 79 people who sought to illegally come to Australia by boat were screened out by immigration officials. 73 of them were all returned back and 6 are on their way back very shortly. I remember Senator Carr referred to it as economic migration. Now, I was there in January and I had the opportunity to see things on the ground for myself, not as part of a sponsored visit from the Sri Lankan government at the commencement of that program. We were in the hands of the Tamil National Alliance and we went everywhere they wanted to take us. So I've had the chance to look at these things firsthand. I've spoken to the UNHCR on the ground, the IOM on the ground. I've spoken to the Indian High Commissioner and others who are very involved in dealing with those issues up in India themselves. I mean, India is 30 kilometres away. Australia is 3,000 kilometres away. The choice to come to Australia has very strong economic motivations.
Yes, of course, and you know there's no doubting that some of that great influx in the arrival of Sri Lankans over the past 15 months or so was to some degree economic, but not all of it, was it? Will you be taking any steps steps to monitor how those returned to Sri Lanka, especially if they're Tamil, are treated by the government?
Well, that process already exists. And
how?
Well, that's done through the UNHCR and the IOM and other international agencies. And that's the process that the Indian government is currently engaged in with the Sri Lankan government, with the return of thousands of people back out of India into Sri Lanka. Now, those processes are already established, Fran, and I think they're good processes, and I want to continue to work with those processes in the ongoing dialogue that I have with the Sri Lankan government. We're working here all together to ensure that we put an end to this terrible trade, and that's our purpose here. I mean, the Greens approach was tried by the previous government. The softening of our borders and all of that, they tried it all, and over 1,100 people ended up dead. Now, I'm not going to repeat the mistake of the previous government in being led around by the Greens.
It's 11 to 8 on Breakfast. Our guest this morning is Immigration Minister Scott Morrison. Minister, if I can go to the concerns about the level of secrecy around the boat arrivals, hasn't it become absurd when last week an asylum seeker boat arrived in Darwin Harbour? On Wednesday, you were asked in the Parliament to provide details on its arrival and you wouldn't give any. 2 days later, it's confirmed in your weekly briefing. Why was it a secret on Wednesday and there on offer without even a question on Friday?
Well, I think Lieutenant General Campbell went into quite a lot of detail last, Fran, about that, and he was also backed up prior to that by the former CDF, Angus Houston.
Can you just explain for people listening what was achieved then in denying the Australian people that information for 2 days?
Real-time reporting of people smuggling activities only advantages people smugglers by confirming voyages which provide proof of voyage for payment. It disrupts cash flow operations of the people smugglers. It ensures that the people smugglers aren't able to use official government statements with high levels of detail, as was provided by the previous government, to go around claiming responsibility for voyages and to encourage other people to get on boats. Now, both Lieutenant General Campbell and Air Chief Marshal Houston, the former CDF, have made it crystal clear that there is great advantage for the government to manage how this information is used. Now,
because we spoke to the Shadow Minister, Richard Miles, earlier about this, and he said in government they were never given any advice by anyone, including presumably from Angus Houston, that this was damaging their efforts, this release of information.
Well, they weren't running the operation we're running, Fran. They were running a water taxi service. They were running an accommodation service for people smugglers. We're running a very different...
They were trying to stop the arrivals, weren't they?
They were accepting arrivals at a rate in the thousands per month and just taking them direct to CI as part of a water taxi service. We are running a regional deterrence framework, not a regional accommodation framework the previous government was running, and we're running at a much higher level of operational intensity, and the nature of things that we're involved in requires operational security, and that's the very point that Angus Houston was confirming last week. Now, I notice there hasn't been a great deal of coverage of Angus Houston's comments, but I certainly noted them, and I appreciate his making them, because it underscores the point that both Lieutenant General Campbell and the government have been making,